Hey everyone. Looking forward to seeing your presentations. I know this is the last day of the month. A lot of you were signing up for next month, so we'll get into those soon. Luckily, I am finishing our last PowerPoint here. Um, Today, I have a knee surgery tomorrow, so I'm going to be out for a day, but that's why I scheduled it tomorrow. I wouldn't miss this class for the life of me. It's groups. It's something you have to learn in social work. So, wanted to at least get through this last PowerPoint for you to prepare you on the day you are leading your group, and start taking questions about the final paper. So if you're doing either a grant proposal or a group proposal, that is great. And I look forward to reading those too. I love stuff that actually gets implemented in the field. Like if you're going to work at the Xenia Domestic Violence Shelter and you get them $30,000 for COVID funds, for cleaning, for families, something like that, to run, maybe even like a sanitation group for families in the DV shelter during coronavirus, something of that nature. So get creative with it. Use everything that you've learned from the book and the PowerPoints about groups, how to start it, how to write it up, how to implement it, because that's how money is made in the long run. That's how you will fund your programs, how you will get things going. So what I like about this last PowerPoint, you can get it on Schoology, and it's kind of like summing up everything about implementation of your group. So like when you actually start going live with the group, which will be next month, and then at your internships and practicum very soon and faster than you've seen in a minute. So let me get this going for you.
Role responsibility.
I was reviewing it before we got here, but I was in the middle of it. It's 17 slides, but here's the first one.
Hello again, class, and welcome to our lecture on implementation as part of our group skills in substance abuse counseling course. Each of our lectures this week will include specific descriptions of how this week's material fits into your group project. As you know, your group will select a group intervention, and the proposal will describe the specific population that you have selected, as well as the type and purpose of the group. Further, your group project will outline screening criteria for group members and group size, the group goals, an exploration of legal, ethical, and cultural considerations for your group, as well as termination criteria and outcome measures. As we look at the objectives for this week, I want to remind you, as always, to review the chapter for the week prior to viewing the lecture, as it is intended to supplement the reading. By the end of the week, you should be able to describe the necessary steps in developing and implementing a group in addictions. Your authors outline 8 key considerations that are necessary when planning a new group. These include purpose, structures, role responsibilities, location and resources, membership and group size, time frame, group rules and boundaries, and evidence and evaluation. As you can see, there are many things to take into account when planning a group, and one thing that your authors did not specifically address was why group workers must plan their group so carefully. I'm also including on your list cultural considerations, as well as legal and ethical issues.
So as you can see, this is kind of wrapping everything up, all of the things that you will cover in group. So from screening criteria and the size of the group, you would always have your purpose of your group, even in your paper. So both when you lead the group, you can tell me about that and include that, and then definitely when you write the paper, because it is a long final paper. And so you'll be able to cover the necessary steps in developing and implementing a group. So when you're putting it together, consider all of those, the purpose, what your structure is, if your room, if it's an addiction studies group, whatnot. As a social worker, what your responsibilities are, your location and resources, because sometimes that is hard to find a room to get a group going, especially in the time of COVID. Time frame, usually, as we've mentioned, they are 10 to 12 weeks, like traditional therapeutic groups. And then, even your rules and boundaries when you're leading a group, what those will look like. And then evidence and evaluation, and certainly cover cultural considerations and the legal and ethical issues. So that gets us to 5. While you're planning your group.
So why plan groups? Group workers must plan their groups and prepare their group members in order to set the stage for an effective group experience. Failures to properly plan the group are a significant contributor to poor group work outcomes, and planning is a requirement for ethical and best practice in group work. Without a plan, leaders have little idea regarding what sort of members may benefit from the group and what sort of members may not be appropriate for the group. Let's return now to those 8 considerations when planning for a new group.
So as you can see, you plan the group because they really do suck when you don't have something in plan, like whatever it may be. If you think you're going to do just like a mindfulness exercise and meditating, and you'll just sit there for an hour, that can be fine and go over well for so long. But if it is a therapeutic group, you might have to do a little bit more research planning and content. Like, you want something that goes over well. The Girl Circles manual is very good for that, as it gives you all kinds of ideas what to do. It can give, without plan, poor group work and outcomes, and it will be almost unethical. So, you wouldn't have done your due diligence. And using evidence-based groups like Girl Circle is considered best practices. So as it says here at the end, without a plan, a leader may have little idea what sort of members may benefit from the group or become casualties of the group. So you really do want to do your homework and your research and go from there. So here's the next part on purpose.
The purpose of the group varies greatly, and you'll want to be sure that your purpose aligns with the type of group you plan to have. For instance, a psychoeducational group is typically intended to impart information, so a group purpose related to expressing and processing feelings might not be appropriate. However, a counseling group for those experiencing grief may have an intended purpose of creating a space to express and process feelings. The author shared a nice model for describing group purpose. And it's important to be clear on what your primary purpose is, and then any secondary purposes as appropriate. To be clear, you may have only one purpose. Having and expressing a clear purpose for the group helps the leader remain focused on the task at hand. It allows for clear communication with regard to the group's aims and objectives. It helps explain how the group might be relevant to participants, and it helps articulate how your group may differ from or be similar to other groups.
So as you can see on the purpose, as you're planning it with your group members, you're of course going to impart information on them. Ideally, especially in addictions group, motivating clients to change. You are creating a space for their expression and purpose of feelings, making sure they know it's confidential, and you challenge them. So again, you're balancing between empathy, empathizing with your client, and challenging them to do better, than empathizing with the struggle and then challenging. So that's always in counseling, that balance between empathy, challenge, empathy, challenge. And you could do so flagrantly as saying, our primary purpose for running this group on addictions is to get you to quit smoking dope or quit drinking or quit, like several of those things. Our secondary reason for running this group is to get you off probation or get you away from this, that, or the other. And it is the importance of having your purpose when you're leading that group. So let's get into the next about the structure.
Structure refers to the specific shape and format of your group. Structuring the group means running the group according to a prescribed plan or agenda. Having a clear structure in mind can help promote cooperation, lessen the anxiety that often comes with new situations or experiences, and facilitates the inclusion of everyone in the group. Typically, as the group moves into the working stage and is functioning at a high level, there is less need for structure. In early stages of groups, however, structure can be an aspect for both leaders and members.
All right, so in the structure, as you've seen the online AA meeting, a lot of AA meetings do just a simple circular group where everybody is of equals. That does promote cooperation. It helps lessen their anxiety. It will facilitate inclusion. So a lot of those things are helpful for what you may be doing and how you want to run your group. So when planning it, keep in mind the structure. You can make note of that in your paper or how you're running the group. We'll go on to the next piece on role and responsibilities.
Role responsibilities refer to the co-facilitators or co-leaders' roles before, during, and after the group, as well as the roles of the surrounding treatment system. One aspect of understanding role responsibilities includes being aware of specific policies and protocols for emergency situations like violence, self-harm, seizures, and fire. Another aspect includes considering contingency plans for what leaves prematurely due to distress, anger, or intoxication, and specifically what supports might be available to them. Pre-group preparation allows time for the facilitators to familiarize themselves with the group topic and materials, gather together group resources, allocate facilitation roles, and plan ahead for any group issues that may arise, and when necessary, alert team members outside the group about where their support may be needed. Pre-group preparation is particularly helpful when facilitators are group work, new to a particular group, or have not worked together before.
All right, so with roles and responsibilities, as you saw there, she's kind of closing in on as the intern. You're going to have a lot of things that you'll take care of for your social work supervisor. You always have covered, and every building will have this plan. So if there's an emergency situation, any pre-group preparation. So again, using Girls Circle as our example, your topic and material is already laid out for you. So that is actually very nice because a lot of times people pay tens of thousands of dollars for a manual like that. The roles of what the different group members will do or social work interns, which could be next year. You try to forecast any issues that could come up, especially if you see somebody not getting along in the first group. And then you try to find support. So finding ways that maybe your supervisor has more and better ideas. They're veterans at running these groups. Like, what do they suggest? What do they think should be done?
With respect to location and resources, when you have the option to select the room for your group, try to find one that is neither too big nor too small for the expected number of group members. You may also be able to moderate temperature and lighting, both of which seem like small issues, but a safe and a comfortable environment is very important for group members. Finding a room that is quiet, equipping it with materials like whiteboards or pens and paper can also promote good outcomes. Finally, facilitators may choose to be present to welcome group members to the room, and seating should be arranged so that all group members can hear and see each other.
All right, so you saw in the selection and criteria and location resources, a lot of things that would come up with folks. For example, it might not seem like an issue at the time. Maybe if you're just starting out, the size of the room, it could be something that comes up with different folks. There could also be temperature issues, which I feel like at Central State, we are very familiar with that. So it is something that we do on a regular basis. I think it's because they have boiler heat. Some of the buildings are older. It gets really hot. So you can at least open a window to regulate it. If it's too hot, you just like fall asleep or it's uncomfortable to sit there. Um, Quiet is good too. So making sure to have electronic devices turned off and, even like the lights flashing on the phone. Like I know even email background noise, there's a good example of one I just heard right there. Things that can bother people. Um, Nowadays, there's so many electronic communications. We're all so distracted by texting and by um, cell phones and different things that are going on. It might be helpful to even do like put your phone in the basket at the front of the door so you all can see where they are and you're not bothered by them. See if you can make that one of the group rules, because that is tough to do, to just like really focus in and give people your undivided attention. I mean, it's hard when we have a lot going on as teachers to do that. Materials are helpful. So if you do have whiteboards, we still have a chalkboard in here. So over there, I could write on the chalkboard. That helps when you're providing information. Make sure you have chalk. So it does say pens and papers. It's like if you're handing out to people. And the leaders present and on time. I actually led a group once where that was an issue. One of the leaders would always show up 10 minutes late. It was so annoying. We were equals, but they would always be late. So it was on me. I had 5 kids who were doing the trauma group, and I was in charge of these 5 kids. And it really took 2 because the kids were all over the place. So, hopefully you have a good team player, a good partner, a good worker. Not all the times does that come up. So that can be challenging at times. So I have surgery tomorrow. This is about the doctor. So let me get you guys running on this and take this call.
When we consider selection criteria and group size, it's important to be clear and transparent about criteria for who should and should not attend the group. Membership in a group may be based on shared life experiences, life stage, presenting problem, or demographics. Leaders must be prepared to make decisions about referrals during the selection process. Any potential member whom you do not accept into your group should be given at least 3 resources for agencies or clinicians who may be able to offer services. During the selection, leaders may ask important issues regarding motivation, explain attendance requests, and other basic rules of the group. Recommendations for group size depend on several factors, including age of the clients, experience of the leader, type of group, and the issues that are being addressed in the group. For example, a group of elementary age members might be kept to about 3 or 4 members, while a group of adolescents might be fine with 6 to 8 people. For a weekly ongoing group of adults, about 8 people may be considered ideal. Group size big enough to give lots of opportunity for interaction, but small enough that everybody can be involved.
All right, so I get to make sure not to eat after midnight tonight, and no water after 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. Surgery, they want me there at 12, but I'm getting cut open on my knee at 3, done by 4. So that's kind of annoying. That's like 16 hours of not eating. They said you'll be okay with IV fluids. Anyway, also no decongestants or things that interfere with the surgery. So the next few slides here, selection and criteria of the group size. So, and this again is summing everything up, like who should attend, who should not attend. Good example is Alcoholics Anonymous. They have both an open meeting and a closed meeting. And with the open ones, family members and friends of the alcoholics could attend to get an idea of what's going on. Closed meeting, only alcoholics can attend because they would feel more comfortable opening up in front of recovering alcoholics. So that's a good thing to differentiate. Also what life stage they're in, the presenting problem, maybe demographics, because in the city you could have a different round of folks that you have out here in the country by Xenia. And then referrals. Traditionally, it says minimum of 3. So that is kind of the way groups had been run at Lighthouse. If we only had 2, we actually would only bill 1 person at a time for like the first half one person case management, the other half another person case management, because groups are technically defined as 3 or more. That goes into the financing of it, because I think they get $33 per hour per person. So if you have that group of 3, it's $100 for that hour. Same with case management, you got about $98 an hour. Counseling, case management, you got $89 an hour for an individual session. So that's kind of why billing wise groups are different. Helping get them motivated, covering your ground rules, and then making sure the group size is big enough are definitely important items in there. So next we're going to cover your time frames.
A specified time frame relates to the length of the group program, the duration of each group session, and the date and time the group will take place. These decisions depend on your setting and the group type and purpose. Groups can also vary according to how flexible or fixed they are with regard to these factors. For instance, some groups may be able to end early or run late from time to time, while other groups operate under a fixed time frame. Further, some groups may be able to extend the number of sessions, while other groups are not. Again, these differences may depend on the setting, for instance, an agency or a private practice, but also relate to the type of group and the purpose of that group.
So we do run groups at my private practice. That would be different than the agency, and billable wise, that's different too. So you always want to have the ground rules and cover things like how long, how many sessions it is. Often it is 10 or 12 sessions per group, is that way you can run them about every quarter and have a few weeks off in between. There's 52 weeks in the year. So if you had a 12-week group, that would cover 48, and then 2 weeks off in between would get you up to a week off would get you 52 weeks total, or 10 weeks. So it lets you do groups every quarter. Then the duration, usually groups should be like, minimum 38 minutes. That allows you to bill for 45 minutes. Really, our agency wanted us to have it at 53 minutes, because then Medicaid would pay you for 1 hour. And you could write 53 minutes in there. It's Medicaid who rounds up. And then variations based on setting, because the agency or private practice may bill differently if you had self-pay or cash only. Then the group type, if it is psychoeducational and counseling, and then the purpose could change with that too. So those are some of the things to keep in mind in terms of the time frame. And so next we'll go on to ground rules and boundaries here.
As a leader, you may have your own ideas for basic group rules, but it's also helpful for members to come up with some agreed upon rules. For instance, rules that focus on confidentiality, emphasize respect for others and different views, underscore the need for sharing time, avoid talking over each other, or the glorification of drugs and alcohol. It can also be helpful to display these rules in the room and ask clients to read them aloud at the start of the meeting to reaffirm their agreement. Finally, facilitators must have a clear idea of what confidentiality means in their service setting and where the limits lie, so they can clearly communicate these to the group.
So getting into the ground rules and boundaries, again, letting them know how important confidentiality is. And then as a group member, their responsibility to confidentiality. Like we're guided by our license in that, but a lot of folks there are an individual present that they still could get in trouble sharing that, but stressing that their confidentiality is of utmost importance. With share time, you could do like an egg timer, even the stick, passing around a talking stick so nobody's talking over each other. If it is addiction related, which this was training for, no glorification of drugs or alcohol. It does help if it can be an hour long. You could take a break in the middle, but no eating, drinking, or smoking. So maybe water, but if you do have like an hour long group with a break at the halfway point, you could get away with 30 minutes of not drinking either. And so those are some of the things you would cover just to make sure everyone is focused and present, because those will be issues you'll get in different social work agencies.
Our next lecture will explore more deeply the issue of evaluation and how it can serve as an important tool for leaders and groups. For now, I will say that evaluation should be an ongoing process within the life of the group, providing insight and feedback on how group members experience the group, as well as the strengths and limits of the leader, the overall effectiveness of the group, and ways to improve the group in the future.
So these are some of the things that you'll consider in terms of how you evaluate the group. Like at Lighthouse, we always had it to where they could go to a link on their smartphone, because everybody has like a website. They could type the group they're evaluating. It helps to get that feedback as a group leader, and you can see how you lead it better. You can lead and have the members' experiences. You could take a quote from them if they're okay with sharing it, about talking about what the group did for them. You can share with your boss to get a raise, your overall effectiveness of that group with like clients you're working with. And then most importantly, opportunities to improve the group in the future, because that's something we always want to work on, ways we can do things better, and things are always changing. Pandemic is the perfect example of this. Like, how did we know we would have to be doing teaching this way online and filming it only a year ago at this point in time? So figuring out how to do things better and how to deliver the info better. Last few slides, we got cultural considerations and a few others.
Cultural considerations are another important step in planning and implementing a group. As we know, culture plays an integral part in how individuals experience their own identity, approach relationships with others, and operate within the group context. Therefore, as we plan our groups, we must consider how culture may impact the group members individually and the overall group. Your book addresses some specific considerations for groups addressing issues related to substance use, citing that as a group, clients with substance use problems often have difficulties with authority, may have experienced a significant amount of trauma, and may have led isolated, stigmatized, and often quite chaotic lives with similarly chaotic internal lives. The authors also cite motivation as another issue to consider, because one cannot assume that all group members will have the same level of motivation, even when they all seem to be at the same stage of recovery. As we think about making adjustments based on these considerations, some clients may experience poor attention and concentration as a result of drug use, and it may be helpful to adjust the length of the group accordingly, repeat the group's core message. Many group members will be skilled in avoiding their difficulties, and the very nature of attending a group can be an unsettling challenge to this well-versed coping strategy. Some group members may have been coerced into treatment or may be experiencing numerous social stressors, physical health issues, and mental health issues as well. As a reminder, we take this information into consideration in order to prepare for the potential issues that may present themselves in the group context, but do not assume it.
All right, so I cut her off, but don't assume any cultural considerations for anybody. So with your cultural considerations, it's an important part of that experience, like especially in groups. So when you're a leader planning a group, keep it in mind that, as social workers now, we see every sort of population. Trauma, addictions, those are things that affect every single person under the moon. You don't have to be of any race, religion, creed, age, or whatever. So leaders planning the groups, you want to make sure to think about those things. Authority, trauma, isolation. Motivation is a good one for all types of groups. Sometimes if you get a court-ordered client, they are not very motivated to do whatever it is. If it's anger management for domestic violence, if it's addiction recovery for alcoholism, things of that nature, you'll find folks that are extremely motivated and came in on their own volition are a little easier to work with sometimes. Those who are court-ordered might be kind of just in the pre-contemplative stage, like, I drink, but I get in trouble. I've had one DUI. I'm not old enough to be an alcoholic, something of that nature. So And again, repeating the last phrase that I cut her off on, we can't rely on cultural considerations to assume anything about individual members. So no matter what you think or see, it's better to ask somebody than to assume it, and ask, their preferences and whatnot will be very helpful. Well, it went dark on us. Next one is legal and ethical, wrapping up these last few slides.
Finally, leaders must also consider the legal and issues related to a group, both those that apply to all group work, including confidentiality, competence, and issues like documentation, as well as any issues that may be especially relevant based on the type of group, purpose, goals, or members. For instance, issues of consent are complicated when dealing with children, because in most cases, parents or guardians must be contacted in order to obtain permission for the child to participate. It's imperative that leaders gather all the necessary information regarding legal and ethical issues prior to the start of a group and seek supervision regarding any remaining questions.
So legal and ethical stuff, I do like that last slide there because it is something that you will want to ask your supervisor. So for all the way through your internship, then 2 years after you get your MSW and LSW, you have a supervisor up to your independent license. And you would go one more year with that supervisor if you wanted to supervise groups yourself. So always ask questions, always refer to your supervisor, check in with them weekly, make sure you're okay on consent forms that you have kids sign, or the confidentiality, like who can look at the client records. If they are court ordered, can the courts? Competence, is the leader qualified? Making sure if you are supervising, you don't put someone in charge of an addictions group that's not had trainings in addiction. So a few other things there to consider. Now, you guys can apply all of this to your final project. So here's the application to your project.
Take a moment here to think specifically about your task to develop a proposal for a group that will serve the needs of recovering clients or their families. Let's apply what we talked about here and consider some questions as we move forward. Purpose. You have already been asked to think about and select the purpose for your group. I encourage you to think to make sure that your group purpose aligns with the type of group that you plan. If you're planning to run a task group, that would suggest that the focus of your group will be on completing some kind of real-world assignment, and the group process attends only to those group dynamics that are necessary in service of producing whatever finished product is required. A task group would be less interested in the here and now experience of members, and more into how the various activities during the group session serve the intended goal. A psychotherapy group will be likely to consist of members who are experiencing severe or chronic maladjustment and will focus on problem solving, awareness, or even personality reorganization. Psychotherapy groups attend to group dynamics and promote interpersonal growth and the development to re-educate, rehabilitate, and towards recovery. Having a clear purpose sets the tone for the rest of your planning and also helps potential members understand what the group is for. Selection criteria and group size. Another important consideration as you think about setting up your group for success is to really consider your selection criteria and group size. You may have an intervention that has been shown to be effective for a wide range of people, but your group does not necessarily need to serve that wide range. Think back to the population that you selected and the purpose for your group. Let's say I decided to run an anger management counseling group for children parents or in a drug treatment facility. The intervention that I selected has been shown to be effective for children from ages 5 to 8, both boys and girls, and the research has demonstrated effectiveness with a variety of different races and ethnicities. As I think about running my group, however, I need to think about some practical implications. Having an 18-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy in the same counseling group could create some potential concerns for me as a leader. For instance, it might be difficult to use activities or exercises that would be age appropriate for both of these members. Additionally, there may be some experiences, thoughts, or emotions that the older member may want to share that would be inappropriate for the younger member to hear. This would mean that I either need to establish ground rules to limit what can be shared, or that the older member might decide not to share some experiences that could be helpful to express in a safe and supportive environment. So instead, I may consider my intervention and my environment and develop a selection criteria based on those that's most appropriate. For instance, I may decide to run a group with 4 to 6 members who are between the ages of 5 to 8 for both boys and girls who have a parent in a drug treatment facility and have been referred by their school teacher for issues related to anger management. Or I could decide on a slightly larger group of older members, say a group of 7 to 8 members who are high school girls between the ages of 15 and 18 who have a parent in a drug treatment facility and referred by their school teacher for issues related to anger management. Each of these describes the number of members in the group, how they will be recruited, some screening criteria, and an age range. You can also think about some criteria for exclusion. For instance, I may decide that the group is not appropriate for anyone who has a history of physical violence, and I may refer them to alternate services. Time frame helps me think about how long the group will meet, and also how the group will end. If I run my group in a school, this may have obvious implications for the length of the group, both with respect to each session needing to fit within its designated bell at school, and the fact that I would not want to run the group when school was not in session. In an agency setting, I may need to consider how long my members will be at the agency receiving services, or at an inpatient setting, I would need to consider how long the members will be on site. I may also need to think about whether the group will end at a designated session, say we run the group for 10 or 20 weekly sessions, or we have an ongoing group where members terminate once their goals have been established. Cultural considerations and legal and ethical issues are also portions of your group project and require that you spend a little time referring back to our week 2 materials and discussions. We know that culture plays a role in every group. What considerations have you made in the development and implementation of your group? Further, what legal and ethical issues do you see as being most important as you think about your group? Each group should cover the basic issues like confidentiality, consent to documentation, among others, and also brainstorm any other topics that might be important. Our next lecture will address evidence and evaluation more specifically, and your project will need to be very clear about how and when you will measure individual and group outcomes, which also requires the development of specific goals.
So she gave a pretty good summary of what you could write your final paper on, actually. So Jen was really good in the groups class and counseling program for a while. But again, you could have each one of these be 1 page. And covering, you could even do abstract first, APA style, then the purpose of the group. Make it a grant for a domestic violence shelter or an addiction recovery center. Then a page on the selection and criteria of group size and things you'll consider. It gave a lot of great examples there of what could be used in the final paper. Also, the time frame. She gave other great examples, like if it is during a school year, to make sure it's done within the school year, and then also if it's at an agency, making sure not to do it when, say, there is in-service at the agency or something like that. Also, any cultural considerations. You could maybe even do a half page on legal and ethical issues, and then the evidence and evaluation, how you're going to evaluate it, why you would want to make things better if you could, and things of that nature. So I know we give a good example of how the paper could be outlined in your syllabus, but this is also another great example, and she gave tons of good stuff in that. So before computer dies, I'm going to do the summary and finish up with you guys before our 45-minute mark. Half online, half in person.
As we end our lecture here today, I want to reinforce the idea that there are many things to take into account when planning and implementing a group. Attention to detail will promote a successful implementation, as group leaders and group members will have clear expectations for the group experience. Group type, purpose, and goals must be aligned in order to provide a cohesive and intentional group experience. Although it takes some time up front, a thoughtfully designed group will help groups run smoothly and will make for an overall stronger group experience. This concludes our lecture on implementation. Thank you for listening.
So the fun part is the summary of the summary. So like the summary of implementation and things that you'll do. Making sure that you will take into account everything necessary when you are writing your group proposal and leading the group. It really does help to have attention to details, because it does make the group that much better. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm sure you've all been in a space where it's just kind of dull and boring and might not be as beneficial as you would want something to be for your particular client. Um, it's good to have clear expectations so they know what they're going to get out of the group experience and whatnot. And then finally, the group type purpose and goals are aligned, so you have a good intentionality about that group exercise. So as we finish up here, remember to send me any questions about leading your presentations, turning them in next week. So whoever's leading them, if you're coming in person next week, or if you're actually filming with your cell phone on your group that you're leading, imaginary group, or coming in here and having us be the clientele, and that's good and okay. Either one is fine. And then about the final paper, because about a month into that, to have your 6-8 page final paper APA style, and hopefully you win a grant with that, because it can be great to get a lot of money, and look forward to reading them. So don't be shy. Ask lots of questions. See y'all soon. Bye now.